This is We the Sales Engineers podcast, show 216.
Welcome to We the SEs podcast, the show for sales engineers by sales engineers with your host, Ramsey Majaba.
What's up, SE Nation? Welcome back to another episode. It's a great episode, as all of my episodes turn out to be, because, I had a fun chat with a gentleman by the name of Paul Vidal. He's the head of sales engineering at a company called Reprise, which is meant to help sales engineers. This show is not sponsored by them, but if you do want to check them out, go ahead, check them out. Reprise.com or getreprise.com. It was a great conversation with Paul because Paul came from a very technical background, master's in technology, and switched into sales engineering at a later date. And he also tried sales. So we had a lot to talk about, including sales versus sales engineering, at least the perception of the customers. We talked about selling to IT, which he did, versus selling to sales and marketing. We dig into selling into the sales department specifically, and we share a few stories about some technical mistakes that we've made that may or may not have caused some outages or some financial damage, and what we learned from them. So it was a great conversation, at least in my opinion. Hopefully you guys will enjoy it as much as I enjoy talking to Paul. And now that I've hyped it up, let's jump into the show. Hello, Mr. Vidal. How are you doing?
Doing well. How are you?
I am doing well. For the folks who don't know you, well, shame on them, one. And two, maybe you can introduce yourself.
Yeah, so my name is Paul Vidal. As you can tell by the accent, I live in Philadelphia, obviously originally from France. And I am currently a VP of Solution Engineering at Reprise. Had a long journey in the SE world, which I'm sure we're going to talk about. And basically super passionate about the profession and revenue organizations in general. So I'm looking forward to the conversation.
So, did I understand this correctly? This is a Philadelphian accent?
Yeah, exactly. You heard it right.
Good to know.
Somebody's going to come, that's the problem with Philly. Somebody's going to come and slap me in the face if I say this. So just disclaimer, obviously this is a joke. This is a French accent. Don't come after me.
It's a Lebanese person's joke up in Canada. They can come and smack me if they want. Awesome. So you've been in sales I'm looking at your LinkedIn. You've been in this for a very long time. What drew you to go into sales engineering or sales in general?
That's a good question. It's like with everything that you do in your career, it's kind of like you stumble upon it. I started from a very technical background. I get 2 masters that I got in France because they cram a bunch of knowledge in you in 4 or 5 years. And I started leading very large data migration in international team for billing system. So they have some very good story of me sitting in a bunker in Moldova, in the middle of the night and trying to make an Oracle rack turn on, which is really fun. And by getting an expertise on this particular domain, I ended up being, so I started in post-sales. I ended up being part of the POC process, which I had no idea what it was. People were just asking me questions like, can we do this? Oh, yeah, we can. And so I got a bit of a domain of expertise, and I got a chance to join a startup in my space as the first SE, essentially. Again, not necessarily any idea of what I was doing, never heard about the sales process for sure, and didn't know how to demo. I was like, look, the feature, and that was great. I eventually built this SE organization, and then this wasn't good for me to develop as this company. So eventually I thought to myself, what type of tech stack seems to be the most complicated and where I could sink my teeth into. So I was like, big data, ML, AI, open source, sounds great. Let's go there. I did the interview, and Dimitri, who was the SE director at the time, I didn't know what a name node was for those who know Hadoop. He's like, you don't know anything about this. I was like, nope, but I can learn. And so I spent 2 years at Hortonworks Cloudera. I ended up working with the new product and so on and so forth. And then I stumbled upon a technology that I thought was cheating, because if you look at my GitHub, it's a bunch of like script that is trying to spin up demos and stuff. I saw Reprise and I was like, you guys can build demo in like 3 clicks. This is bullshit. Like, I want to be part of this. Okay. Like, you guys are cheating. So I joined there. But the funny part is that, with startups, sometimes they, especially and that's something that I learned like selling to revenue organization, is they don't necessarily have SE teams, right? So one of the things that I learned is working with IT, there was always a distinction between solution consultant and solution engineering.
Yep.
They weren't, when you start a revenue organization, they're synonymous for some reason.
Okay.
And so I started as VP of sales there. I was like, this is great. I'm going to learn how to sell. And I have some story about this, but I'll let you.
No, please tell me the story. I'm enjoying listening to you.
So here's what happened. What happened when you go to, like, look, you're an SE and you, like, when you, it's like putting yourself in another perspective. As an SE, like many of us think, like, I can definitely just go play golf and send emails. I'm like, obviously, I know this is not how sales is working nowadays, but if you sold to IT, you're like, all right, what is this guy doing? Yeah. The first truth moment as a VP of sales is I was in talking to a potential buyer, and they asked me, they've been testing the product and they're not convinced about the product. I'm like, great, we'll convince you. Let's come up with a list of criteria that will ensure success, right? I'm sure you're aware of, and let's make sure that we can do all of them. And so I start asking questions and writing down the stuff like you do as a good SE, and conclude the call. It's like, okay, so let's work on this, make sure that we can do this, and we'll talk next time. The person that was in front of me went to my boss directly on LinkedIn and said, he's an asshole. Like, no, it's not like, it wasn't, I'm not satisfied with your sales organization. It's like, no, Paul, this guy in particular, I hate him, right? And so the shift that you get from, and this was the first realization, the shift that you get from being in sales is insane. The amount of pressure that you get is something that we don't experience.
It's the same communication. Was it like, if you were an SE, would you have done the same thing?
Yes.
So that's insane. So I kind of did that. I went from sales engineering to sales for a short period of time, and the same people I would call on, and they would always answer me and would love to talk to me as a sales engineer, stopped answering my phone.
Yeah, it's right away. Right away, it's like your brand is like, no, you in particular, nobody else.
And so I went back to sales engineering, but my boss slowly pushed me into sales, and my title has never been sales. I mean, I do a lot of sales stuff that salespeople do in addition to engineering, but I never introduced myself as a salesperson anymore.
Yeah, what do you think I call my team solutions engineers? I'm not, I mean, and it's funny because the flip side of this is when I was my first, when I was leading this pre-sales organization, I was at a stage where we were so small, they didn't have an account rep, so I had to wear both hats.
Yep.
Totally lost credibility. Couldn't work with them anymore. And to the point where the customer said, like, because I hadn't renewed my badge, he passed by me in a corridor. I've been working with them for like 2 months on a pilot. Just like this, there was a week in between I didn't have a badge. And so somebody let me in because we were working with partners. The customer came, like the boss of the customer came back to the guy that we're working with, like, what is this guy doing here? Okay. Working well. So yeah, so that's the first thing that I learned from being a VP of sales, and I really learned that appreciation of the sales profession in general. And it's much more of a science than I thought it was, to be honest. And I got very lucky to have great mentors from the experienced sales leader And it's really a different set of skills. You heard the term like for SE are cats and AEs are dogs or something along those lines, but it's really nurturing this emotional roller coaster that AEs go through over and over again is a profession in its own, which is sales leaders.
So when you say it's much more of a science, can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's things that feel disingenuous, a thing that I didn't understand, I didn't grasp. Like one of the things that I know I have a lot to learn is the SDR, BDR, ISR. So the guys that go outbound and try to get some leads. For me, I thought it was like, well, you're just calling people and telling them, yeah, you want to do the thing. Apparently not. Apparently, there's like a whole field that thinks about what is the exact sequence, and they do A/B testing on figuring out which sequence works, which sequence doesn't work, and to the point that they like every day they will look at, because we receive all of these sequences as well, dissect what's good, dissect what isn't, right? And this is just to get the first call. Yeah. And so you can imagine that everything from there is dissected even more, because the fact of picking a person's interest is theoretically the simplest part of the sales process. So the rest of the sales process that consists of like as we were talking about earlier, like doing the proper discovery, challenging your champions and so on and so forth, and uncovering things that just goes above your head as an SE, are extremely complex and extremely hard to do well.
Nice. Okay. I think we can talk for an entire hour about the science of sales, but this is more to actually, is there a warning you would give for SEs who want to go into sales, who think it's easy, or, hey, that's where all the money's at? Like, what would you tell if one of your SEs came to you and said, I want to try out being a salesperson?
Yeah, so first of all, if somebody wants to try out anything, like, of course, go try it out. But what I would give them is resources. Specifically, I would tell them, look, you have a lot to learn. Like, you think that you can do this because you're coming into the product, and for many times you feel like you have a better relationship with the customer and you're able to do it. Throw all of this out of the window. You will not have this. Like this magic power that you have from your SE title, gone. Not try to build a relationship. And it's going to be brutal emotionally. That's what I would tell them. It's fine for a lot of people. People like this. And that's, because the SE team, it's a spectrum, more or less on sales, more or less on the technical side. I personally enjoy both, which is why I think this profession is the best. But I would tell them, like, be prepared, like, to be, bulldozered by a bunch of emotions, right? So
yeah, and so been doing this for a while, and we don't see, as sales engineers, we don't see the pressure that the sales leadership team put on salespeople, and also the pressure that salespeople, that customers put on salespeople. Right? Yeah, and it's always the salesperson's fault, and sometimes SEs put pressure on the salespeople as well. It's like, hey, Warren, I asked you for, like, this customer called me and said he wants a quote, or she wants a quote. Send them a quote, and it's been half a day and you still haven't sent them a quote. What's wrong with you? It's been 5 minutes. Come on. So yeah, it's there's a lot hidden, and I've seen a lot of SEs sitting across their salespeople in a customer meeting saying, I can do this guy's job.
No, you can't.
I mean, you could. It's not, but you're gonna suck at it for a while.
Yeah, no, exactly. But the point is, you can't pick it up this way, like as easy.
Yeah, it doesn't just happen. You're gonna have to work hard at it. It's like any other skill.
Yes, and it's like with everything, the thing that you don't realize, and you don't even know that you don't realize. Like my wife, for instance. I'm a man. I'm not a woman. And when I'm going for a run in the trails, I feel great. And my wife would tell me, like, no, look, listen, I don't feel safe going alone in the trail in the middle of nowhere. This is something that I'm never going to be able to experience myself because I will never be in this position, right? Same thing with sales, being a rep. Like you've never been a rep, so you can't pretend to know exactly what it is to be. So just a little bit of humility there goes a long way.
Yeah, and we can learn a lot from salespeople. I mean, they have those who've been there for a while have such tough skin, and as sales engineers, we can learn a lot from it. I mean, I hate losing deals. It's not about losing deals, but once I lose a deal, what am I going to learn from it and apply to the next opportunity?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the good ones. I mean, to be clear, I'm not saying that there's no bad sales reps. There is.
I've worked with some.
Yes, we all have.
I've worked with some, and some of them, I've actually worked with a few different ones. There are two that come to mind that I've had customers telling me, I don't want to talk to these guys anymore. I don't like them. One of them I know is very bad. The other one I thought was good.
Yeah.
But from a customer's perspective, they were a little bit too salesy because they asked, what else can we help you with?
Wow.
Right. And,
and that's a big, this could be a tangent to another topic, but
we can go there.
That's where the difference between selling to IT and selling to revenue organization. Like to your point, you sell to IT and you say, so is there anything else that you can help you with? And if you're salesy,
yeah.
I've been on call with selling to other VP of sales. It's like, can I forecast this for this quarter? And they're like, yes or no. And it's much more like, it's really funny because there's an honesty there, right? That I appreciate, which is, I've seen reps say sentences to a revenue organization that never heard before, such as, should we be able to accommodate you with this particular request? Would you be able to move forward within the next week? And I'm like, holy shit, like, what did you just say? To feel super uncomfortable, right? But actually, people appreciate this. Like, I do appreciate when somebody's super honest with me on what they're trying to do.
Yeah, so I'm currently a hybrid, so I do both. I'm an expert in a couple of products, but we have so many. And I got an expert with me on one of the calls. And we were talking about afterwards, he's like, your first question, why did you want to meet with us? Threw the customer off, and you shouldn't be asking that.
Yeah.
And like from an SE's perspective, it's like, oh, no, we can't ask that question. But from a salesperson's perspective, like, yeah, I want to know why they want to talk, right?
Yeah, no, it's
so it's interesting. But going back to the difference between IT and revenue, I mean, as a sales engineer, well, what have you noticed the differences are in terms of sales cycle, in terms of the people the customer, in terms of the users or whatever?
So like fundamentally, you sell to IT organization, you're going to be selling probably bigger deals that are a lot more sticky. Like you connect your stuff to the production database, what are they going to do? Like not use it? Whereas you sell to revenue organization, it's probably going to be a bit cheaper in general. And it's going to be less sticky as well. Like specifically, if you sell something to marketing that they use for a couple of months and then they churn, like there's a lot more churn, I feel like in your organization. So what that means is, what I found is that there's probably more volume, but that's also like, this also obviously, I'm not saying this is the only difference, because there's also obviously a difference of the size of the segment of the market that you're talking to. If you're talking to an enterprise versus you're talking to a large enterprise versus a small company, the kind of same difference occurs. But from an SE perspective, selling to revenue organization, it is, you have more and you do more often. What I found, right? So it's going to be quicker sales cycle, leaner POCs, and you are really looking at optimizing every element of your pre-sale cycle. So some of the things that I do with my team is, like obviously being a leader of an SEO organization, I have a certain number of objectives associated with the objective. I have metrics, and I have I measure this. I have a goal, like a goal for this particular metric. Simple example is I want to reduce the time that we spend from stage 2 to stage 4 on a sales cycle by 50% by the next quarter, right? So this, and you're really looking at optimizing every one of those, right? Which is something that you see less of when you're talking to IT, because it's a lot more about making sure that you are educating and being a customer advocate, right? It's probably because the thing that you sell to revenue organization is less technical to some extent, and it's to be expected because the persona that you talk to are less technical in the first place. But if you sell to salespeople, but it's also because you're not touching IT, like you're not touching the systems, right? You're touching maybe emails or maybe campaigns and so on and so forth. So it's much easier to the product themselves tend to be much easier.
Okay. And you mentioned that with IT, it's a lot more technical. So are you working more with like individual users, or still you're talking to the CTO or anyone in between?
Well, you do all, right? So it's kind of the hard part of being an SE is being able to have multiple conversations at different level, right? And knowing how to change your talk track depending on the level at which you're talking, right?
Right.
And this is the art, right? Is like the CTO does not care about how you do the thing, but it's like, this is the results. It's like, okay, I'm good with this, right?
Right.
But fundamentally, look, you integrate with Salesforce, you integrate with Kubernetes and whatever deployment in the cloud you have. Which one do you think is more technical, right?
Let me guess. Oh yeah, Kubernetes.
There you go.
Yeah, it took me a second there.
Yeah. So that's what it is, right? And that's the fundamental. And because it's more, and also IT moves slower. IT moves slower than the business. That's something that, and that's normal because IT's job is to make sure that they're the one that you don't want to hear about because everything is working fine, and they just don't want to be heard. So their goal is to make sure to maintain, not necessarily innovate, right?
In terms of like working, so you're working with sales, like VPs of sales, or you're working with sales engineering? Who makes the decision for something like it? I don't know if you want to share that actually. So.
No, totally. There's no secret here, and this is I've been looking at this demo experience world quite a bit, so I can tell you. The answer is both. This is the spoiler, but if you think about it, the one of the fundamental things about demo is the product that you use to sell your product is not the same product that you use to solve the problem that you're trying to solve.
Right.
Specifically, you don't need to go into depth of where your product needs to go in order to sell your product, right? And so we're built, what we're doing at Reprise and many other companies that are in this space is accompanying a potential buyer through their demo journey. And their demo journey starts with, like, think about it. Let's say you want to buy something. Like what I wanted to buy is, and it's going to be a shout out to them. I wanted to measure my team's performance and their activities, and relating that to product gaps and so on and so forth. So I considered Viven, who is specifically geared toward SE. Yeah. What I did is, the first thing that I did is, in my experience, is like just search on the internet, looking at what else is out there. And I'm looking at like, okay, so give me a video, a couple of white papers, getting, okay, so this is actually doing what I did. And then you get into, okay, let me look at this particular. Then you get into a tour, maybe like it's something that you see on the website and say, oh, this looks interesting. And then you're looking at like, okay, I'm specifically looking at making sure that I can integrate my Jira with this and can give a reporting on a regular basis to products that I can tell them like there's like 1.5 million on the line on this particular feature, maybe we should prioritize it, right? And so this is the demo where this is the first lightweight demo on the specific features.
Yep. Then
you get into, and so the first part obviously is marketing. The mid part, when it's like a couple of features, this is where it's interesting. It can be an AE, so sales, or it can be an SE, depending on the depth of the complexity of the product. Yeah. And then eventually I went to, okay, so how am I actually going to implement this? And this is where I need to get into the SE demo, where you go in depth into the products, how this works. Then finally you adopt the products. And if you think about like this journey from marketing product tours to sales-led demos and SE-led demos, this is where the demo experience category stands. So to answer your question, I'm talking to head of marketing, I'm talking to head of sales, and I'm talking to head of SEs. When I'm talking to head of SEs, it's more about, and obviously this is what the people that I want to talk to more, because these are our people, right? But it's more about how do I make sure that my SEs are working on something strategic? Like, how do I make sure that I don't waste people's time? And there's two reasons for this. Like, first of all, most likely, if you're like me, you stretch thin, right? Like SEs have a cost and bear to a cost of acquisition. So usually the headcount is never enough. If you've been an SE, you know you've been working too much, right? Hiring is very hard. Like finding good SEs is very hard. Yep. And making sure that your SEs are not bored and doing stuff that they don't want to do is one of the hardest things to do as an SE leader, right? Yep. So if you have a tool that you can use and say like, look, you don't have to spend stupid hours maintaining stuff that you don't even know if it's qualified or not. Yeah, like sign me up. Like none of my SEs are part of the first calls, thankfully.
Yeah. That's the question that I ask a lot of SEs. Like how often do you do the same demo over and over? And they're like, oh man, every day, every week. I'm like, why don't you just record it? But you're providing an interactive way of actually doing it.
I mean, it's just, yes. I mean, like we found some, like we are at a point where the people that are buying are people like me. I don't listen to videos. Like, no. The only one that I like, have you tried to do a tutorial on YouTube? Like, just try to switch to the right place, because I don't want to hear about the guy telling me to like and subscribe for 15 minutes. Yeah. I just want to get into like, just like show me an image. It's like, what the fuck? So I want to touch things, and I'm able to extrapolate, right? I don't need to talk to, like, yes, I will need to talk to someone once I'm qualified, when I know what I need to know, right? Yeah. And so I don't need DSC to spend like 3 hours preparing for a janky demo. Like, just give me something that is, I know it's not going to be the full product. I get it. I know there's stuff that I'm not going to be able to click on, but at least just let me have my own experience, right? And that's why we see the world changing, right? With, you know, however you want to call it.
So you mentioned you talk to marketing, you talk to sales, and you talk to sales engineering heads. Who's the easiest person to work with from those three personas?
It's a good question. Look, the hardest one at the head of SEs, we're assholes.
Yes.
Like, that's the way it is.
I agree with that, Steve.
I'm not gonna lie. And I'm the same way. Like, look, as much as like salespeople have a respect for the craft, and look, we were talking about sequencing and knowing how to approach somebody. I'm the worst. I'm never replying to any one of them, and I just ignore all the time. I never answer to any calls. Like, reaching out to a head of SE is like insanely hard. And then when somebody comes to me, like, I'm doing this all the time, and I'm sure everybody hates me. It's like, yeah, I get it. Like, it's because I actually get it. Like, I understand what you're trying to tell me. It's like, I get it. Like,
stop selling, basically.
Stop. I get it. Let's move on. But they keep like wanting, like, this is how they train. It's like, use every fucking minutes to show all the different features. Like, no, it's fine. I understand.
No, it's I worked on it, so I have to show it. That's the rule. Yeah,
Yeah. So head of SEs are definitely the hardest for this reason, and also because honestly we have the least budget, right? So it's not like we have a lot of budget to experiment. You add this to the fact that SE is a breed that just build everything. Yeah. Like, I get people in my team and they just like come up and they just build shit. I'm like, holy cow, what did you do this? How did you do this? And now I don't need to buy the tool because you just build the script. Now they got to maintain it forever. So I'm not always doing this, but.
Well, yeah. That's the difficulty with internal tools. And I think almost every sales engineer faces it when they're trying to sell to IT, for example. Like, hey, we built this internal tool. All right, so what's going to happen when the person who built it leaves?
Yeah.
That's always the question that comes to mind. Oh, we'll figure it out. It's like, all right, when you figure it out, call me because you're going to need that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, to that end, like IT is a bit more this way, but then the sales side, I have a good. I like working with a head of sales because you can be like very blunt. Like, this is going to affect your bottom line, and they, to the point that we were making earlier, they have very hard and specific rules about what they want to achieve, and so you can tell them like, well, I can help with this, and this. And this is where we fit into your initiative. Then it becomes, okay, cool. I'm interested in the results.
Right.
Marketing, I haven't cracked that nut, I'm going to be honest. Mostly because it's my lack of knowledge, I think, of the profession. I mean, I understand to some extent. I understand the value that we provide for marketing. I understand, conversion rates and generating interest and so on and so forth. But it's a bit harder because I don't speak their language.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's always fun to come from an industry and then try to sell into that industry.
Right? Yes, absolutely. But I gotta say, I do miss, getting into the nuts and bolts of look, I'm pretty sure that my product will work for whatever use case. It's fine. Like, we will move things around. There's maybe one element of your website or your web application that is complicated. I'm going to find a workaround and make it work. Fine. I do miss the idea of like this thrill of like, I don't actually know if this is going to work. like when you work with IT, it's like, I don't know, like, should work.
Yeah, it's funny. I used to work in network design.
Yeah.
And I went on customer side, and the guy who was there before me from my team, there was one problem, they couldn't figure it out. Yeah. And it was 5:00 in the evening. I'm like, I got it. I figured it out. It's like, can I implement this? Like, yeah, please do. As soon as I started implemented, I had to shut down one port, which brought the whole network.
Good job.
The management of the network, not the actual network. So the network was still working, but the managers, like, everybody's like, everything's turned red. Like,
oh my God.
I'm in Dallas, Texas. The network is in Pennsylvania. I'm like, do you have anybody on site?
Oh no. Oh, it's the worst.
When you get overexcited that you solve the problem that you think, because I always work in the lab as a network designer. I don't generally work on live networks, so I'm like, I can just shut it down, bring it up, but I usually have access to the port. I plug them. So yeah, it's I'm happy I don't have to deal with that anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I made some mistakes. One of the notable one is, so I was developing a lot of scripts to deploy in multiple clouds, right? When I was and I was kind of spearheading a lot of these scripts. The latest one I was working on was Google Cloud. And Google Cloud does a very weird thing with authentication, is when you ask for an authentication, it gives you back a file, a JSON file, right? And I was working open source, so I'm publishing my stuff on the internet. long story short, I published my service account credentials on the internet. And it's a perfect storm too, because I also have my my personal inbox. There's a filter on Gmail. I said, if it says unsubscribe, I'm putting in another folder that skips the inbox, right? So GitHub called me. It's like, hey, looks like you like send me an email. It looks like you leaked something. I didn't see it. And I was high-fiving. I was like, look, I fucking did. And it was I worked until late at night, like probably like, I don't know, like 8, 9 p.m. morning, come back 9 a.m., like 12 hours later. And those guys were organized, dude. They were like 3 different tier of VMs that were set up, and they were called like, dev, test, prod. And I figured it was me. I shut it down, created a script to shut it down. Look at the bill, it was like $30,000. And at that point, I'm like, oh, cool. And then obviously my heart sank. And I gotta go to the head of SE, right? And say, like, that's what I did. So I spent some time, wrote an email, put everybody in copies, like, hey, here's what happened. At that time, I did this, I leaked this. I was aware of this the following morning. This is the preventing measure that I set up. I wrote some very neat script, by the way, to shut down a bunch of VM in parallel. And then I think the leak is contained. Tell me how you want to handle this. And to this day, I remember Mark Ledbetter, who's now retired, if I remember correctly, very recently said, as far as I'm concerned, there was no ill intent, so no harm, no foul. Let's move on. And I thought, like, this is probably the best. Like, I want to be that. Like, I want to be the guy that is able to realize this, because, dude, $30,000 in 12 hours, though. So, is it as bad as shutting down a port to manage a network?
It's worse. I don't know. It's worse. I didn't cost anybody any money. You win. You win. I about.
So I've done my fair share of stupid shit. So you learn from them. And if you don't do anything, you're not going to break anything. So
exactly, and that's the thing. Like, you never want to do a mistake that's that big, but if you never make mistakes, you're just gonna stay where you are.
Yeah. Well, thanks for making me feel better. I realize it.
It's not my job.
All right.
But well, I think your boss made you feel better, and I guess.
Yeah, I still feel like, you can tell, like, I still feel really bad about this. Is such a stupid mistake, and like, I now even created the folder that was in the git ignore for it, right? Just to make sure that nobody else does it, right? And then I created the script that will negotiate the credential and put in this folder, but I just forgot the original one.
Right.
So it's like, it's the worst. Anyway, not doing that stuff again, let me tell you.
You're survived. You got promoted, so you must have done something else that's worth $37,000. You made it up somehow. All right.
Well, it's actually funny, because this is where I felt very bad, and I remember my AE, who was like one of the best AE I've worked with. Like, don't worry, I'll add 30,000 on the next invoice. Which obviously he didn't do, because this is illegal, but it was just a way to make me feel better.
Well, he probably sold something else for $37,000, but yeah.
Well, try to add a couple of zero, but yes.
Yeah, no, there you go. All right. Well, I guess it's time to move on to the not so fire round. These are the same 4 questions I ask almost every guest.
Mm-hmm.
I want to hear what you think about it. So, what do you love about sales engineering in general?
I'm going to very, very selfish answer first, and then I'm going to tell you the real answer. Very selfish answer first is, look, I studied in implementation, right? And my problem is I have a tendency of, how you play a video game, and then you play the video game and you're like, okay, I know what I need to do to get better, but you just don't want to put the effort to get better because it's super linear. That's how I felt about post-sales. That's what I love about pre-sales. You design the solution, and you don't spend 6 months going to the small bugs. That's what attracted me to pre-sales in the first place. Is you get to design solutions, but you don't have to see them through like every step of the way that you're eventually going to be able to solve, but are like super boring and repetitive.
Yeah,
that's what attracted me in the first place.
It's kind of like the visionary. You're the visionary. You can see the fix, or you can see the solution. Somebody else has to come in and do the greasy work and like put it together. Yeah, okay.
The
other reason,
the thing that makes me stay, right, is I just love seeing the community and how people develop. I think that it is one of the best profession because it combines puzzle solving and people skills, and deep puzzle solving and deep people skills. And I'm seeing my team that had started, that some of them are just have tremendous personal skills, still working on the technical skills. I love coaching them there. And some of them have the tremendous coaching skills, just don't know how to like understand intricacy of conversation. And this is something like I had to work a lot on, like coming from a technical side, like really understanding and being empathetic. It's this combination and the community is what make me stay.
Nice. I mean, we always talk about being empathetic, which is kind of what you said, but I did a video today and talking about the 4 quadrants of sales engineering skills, and it's like, you're empathetic, but so what, right? If you don't use that empathy to solve the customer's problem, it wasn't really useful. And you're kind of doing that with your SEs, where you're teaching them to use that empathy to solve a problem. Empathy on its own is useless.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sad you're having this, and that's empathetic. Okay, I'll see you later.
So if you want to make me go down that route,
go ahead.
A book called Against Empathy by Paul Bloom, who is a philosopher. The problem with being empathetic is that it is fundamentally biased. As human beings, you tend to be empathetic with people that look like you. This is how we're wired, right? This is evolution, psychology, and so on and so forth. So it's not about being empathetic. It's about being rationally compassionate. So it's like really making an effort to understand the way that other people are perceiving things. And that's a very hard thing to do because it requires an effort. Empathy is often, I know I'm splitting hair here, but it's still important, is that to be a good SE is the thing that I found the most valuable is try to actually understand how your audience is perceiving what you're telling them. Like, imagine yourself that for me that sells demo software. Imagine that you are, when you're building this POC, imagine that you are selling the product that you're currently capturing. Imagine that you were doing this. Like, what would you do? And really understanding how people think almost is what's going to make you better, more than just a connection at the emotional level, right?
I mean, going back to the beginning of our discussion, when you were the VP of sales, you said the same thing as you would say as a sales engineer, but you hadn't considered that how they see you as a salesperson.
That's right.
How they see you as an SE, which is perfect. Yeah. All right. So the second question of the not so fly around, and by the way, it's not so fly around because we can take our time and go down rabbit holes, is what would you change about the role?
All right. So this is time for me to be controversial. SE needs to start building more. I don't know. There's something currently happening in the profession where I see a lot of SEs that like, no, I don't code or I don't build stuff. And they're just essentially honing on the sales part of the job. I and I posted about this on LinkedIn, I don't understand. I think that if you're not going deep in the product and building things on your own, even if they're not necessarily for a customer, you're not going to be a good SE. My team is the way that we set it up is it's different ways to call it. It's like 10x time, they call it a Databricks, for instance, or Google has another way to say it. It's essentially 20%, 10 to 20% of their time that is dedicated to go build whatever you want. And I can tell you that it made my team like 20 times better in very short period of time. And remind you, I'm not selling to IT, I'm selling as a sales software, right? Which is not that complicated. It's HTML and CSS.
So here's the question. If someone doesn't work for you or Google or Amazon or these big companies that say 20% of your time is for this, how does one balance supporting their salespeople, learning the sales skills, which a lot of times technical people find harder than learning the technical skills, and then still continue working on their technical skills and getting better at that?
So I can tell you that you go to any of your manager and you tell them, I would like to be able to dedicate a block of time, couple of hours, let's say the Friday afternoon, to build stuff. And I can tell you that most of the managers, and explaining them like, I want to be more proficient in the tool, I want to make sure that I understand and I can respond intelligently. Most of the SE manager is going to welcome you with open arms, right? And because it's their job to make sure that you well balanced. Yep. If that doesn't work, there's a lot of jobs out there. So,
I would say simply just block it off. You don't have to ask permission from anybody.
Yes.
And then tell them the result.
But I will. Okay, so here's the real answer. You block it off, but you still tell your manager. Because then you don't want this to backfire. Just be open. It's like, I'm blocking this off because I need this time to build shit.
Okay. Yeah. From my perspective, I wouldn't see how it would backfire unless you're blocking off like 6 hours a week.
But look, sorry, it's me being.
No, go ahead, please. I like debate.
Working with sales leadership, right? It's very quick. Like in leadership, you have very quickly have stuff that says, well, I was trying to get what did you lose the opportunity? Well, I was trying to get Paul on the call, but it was Friday afternoon. I couldn't get him because he blocked his time. And then the sales manager go to the SC manager. It's like, what the fuck's going on? And if the SC manager doesn't have context, it's not good for you. They don't have the tool to have your back. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So it's just a matter of transparency because things are being thrown. They're being thrown again because of what we talked at the beginning, because the pressure under which every sales leader is.
Yeah. So let me ask you this then: if there's a deal on the line and they're trying to get an SE who has blocked their time, even though they told you, would the recommendation be just continue blocking your time or shift that around and still fit that customer meeting in there?
It becomes exception management at that point, right? And so there's always going to be an exception, right? It's a heuristic, right?
Yeah.
But if it's better to be able to block yourself 3 out of 4 weeks than 0 weeks at all.
Exactly. Something small better than nothing at all.
Yeah.
But yeah, like from my perspective, an SE should be able to do that. Like, hey, I block my time. If a salesperson comes to me and says, I need you for this, and it's going to be a deal breaker, then by all means, shift it around. I mean, we have to be flexible as SEs. And obviously, if it might be better to have your sales managers back, your SE manager.
Yeah, you say that, but look, you gotta come on interviews with me because sometimes I'm like, what are you guys doing? Like, what are you interviewing? Like, no, I don't want to learn about the product. Like, what do you expect you're gonna do right here? Like, what's going on? Right? So
just download it in my head. And
they just like, I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah. All right.
That's my soapbox, right?
Yeah.
Die on it.
We'll do another session about this if you want. All right. So is there a book or resource that you recommend to your SEs that it's a must read or must watch, must whatever?
Not really. I found myself one of the key aspects of being an SE is being able to find the resources that you need in order to be successful. So I tend to say, look at stuff that you do, look at stuff that, there's plenty of communities that are around. Just search on the internet a little bit and apply yourself to find the resources about pre-sales. You're going to find a lot. I don't think there's one silver bullet, if you will, that would make you better at your job. I'd rather you spend some time to be independent and find stuff on your own.
Okay. So the one resource would be Google.
Yeah, well, it's just the internet.
just all of Google. Yeah, all of the internet. All right. Last question of the not so fire round, Paul. Is there a habit you're working on today to improve in your personal or professional life?
Is there, sorry, a hobby?
Habit.
Yeah. I mean, I have a lot of habits, and I'm constantly trying to get better. One of the things that I'm really bad at is it's something that I had to learn as being a leader specifically is not shutting up. I'm really bad at this. I'm really bad at, it's sometimes perceived as tension because I'm very passionate, as you can see. I really want to talk and I really want to convey the point. And especially in the days and age of Zoom, where because of the latency of videos, there's less chance for people that talk less to speak. And so one of the things that I'm really working on is pausing and listening first. It's super hard. It's super hard, and especially when you know the answer and I'm super impatient. That this is just no, I get it. But yeah, this is the thing that I'm really working on is trying to listen first. You always want to be this leader, the that has the wisdom. It's never going to be me, right? I'm not going to be whatever the turtle is in Kung Fu Panda or whatever. I'm always going to be, the panda probably. But yeah, that's what I'm working on. It's been challenging.
Well, good luck with that, and I feel like you're doing well, at least in this interview. As we're coming to a close, Paul, I want to ask you: was there anything you hoped I was going to ask you today and I didn't?
No, I mean, am I hiring SEs? Yes.
Are you hiring SEs? Okay. What are you looking for in an SE then? Who should apply, and who shouldn't apply?
If you don't
want to learn.
If you don't want to build, just don't come to me. That's the answer. No, I mean, I really enjoy this conversation. It's I'm always happy to look. You ask a half narcissistic guy to talk about himself for an hour. Of course it's gonna be excited. So no, it was great. Looking forward to see how it turns out. And yeah, I mean, if anybody in the community has some hot takes on our conversation, I'll be curious to see what they think.
Yeah, I'll make sure they actually, if people want to tell you their hot takes, where can they do that? How can they reach and connect with you?
So look, I'm on LinkedIn. It's probably the best. So Paul Vidal is probably the best way to get at me. And then I'm pretty sure that anybody can find all my information on the internet.
Nice.
I'll send you a post. So otherwise, I'm Paul at Get Reprise is where I am professionally.
Okay.
So, yep.
Well, I'll have at least your LinkedIn on the show notes so people can come in and connect with you there. Thank you so much, Paul, for your time. This has been great. And I look forward to having more chats with you in the future.
Sounds good. All right. Take care, man.
And that brings us to the end of the show. Thank you, Paul, for coming on. Thank you for listening, for being here. Show 215. Show notes will be at wetheSalesEngineers.com/show 216, not 215. So check those out. And what did you guys think? Did you enjoy the chat? I love Paul's experience, the different industries he's worked in, and how open he is about the mistakes that he's made and that I've made. Sales, one tip for people who want to go into sales: don't assume you know how to do it. It takes time, it takes effort. It's a very different skill than sales engineering. You're much more out there. I remember when I moved into sales back in 2016 for a few months while they were trying to hire a new salesperson. So I was doing that job. And I noticed that if I had the choice to go out and talk to a customer versus work on a demo, I'd always prefer to work on the demo. And as salespeople, you have to be out there talking to customers. And that's just one example. So yeah, these are my thoughts about it. Check out the SE hotline if you're looking for some additional help. I always want to plug it. It's there for you. If you don't know what it is, let me know. And that means I have to fix something, because the people that are using it are finding it very helpful, at least in my opinion. So check it out. And that's it for me. Thank you, Paul, for coming on again. And I will see you next time. With that, I am signing off.